Welcome back, everybody. It is November 12th, and the regular season is officially in the books. NCS playoffs starting this week. We will be breaking down some of the first round playoff matchups, where some of the teams ended up locally. Kind of some question marks with this new playoff system, how it kind of played out. Obviously, some quite a bit of discussion, I think, over the weekend, kind of with how how this new NCS competitive equity system played out. But before all that, we're going to take you guys through our top seven, or final top seven of the regular season. You know, like we've been doing the last couple of years, we'll be kind of putting our rankings here on hold. Uh, until after all these teams are finished in the playoffs. So yeah, big show for you guys coming this week. We'll kind of talk about rankings, playoff stuff, but Keenan, week 11, definitely some. I think last week we said it could be wild. I'd say it lived up to the hype. There were definitely some pretty crazy games last week. Not a ton of crazy games, kind of amongst some of our top ranked teams here, but definitely some very interesting results. And some really exciting games that were a lot of which were decided, down the wire. So week 11 definitely, lived up to the hype, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, just looking back on this regular season as a whole with this new Redwood Empire Conference realignment, right? I would say I think it would be safe to say the majority of these leagues kind of lived up to the hype, and obviously there were some runaway winners in some of the leagues for sure. But for the most part, a lot of these like almost three out of the four leagues weren't decided until maybe the second to
Yeah.
last week of the season. So yeah, pretty good realignment, I would say, for the first year of them doing this. I know they're going to realign every after next year as well,
2 years.
but for the first go round, I think it was pretty successful.
Yeah, and I do think there probably is going to be, I think there does need to be a bit of realignment too. I mean, I think the upper echelon teams in all the leagues were very competitive. Ukiah and St. Vincent in the Bay, American Canyon and Casa Grande in the Valley. Newman, Marin Catholic, even Windsor kind of was up there too. When it was all said and done, but I think some of those bottom tier teams definitely need to be kind of shuffled around. Definitely, I think there were probably still a couple mismatches. I think in some of the leagues too, just kind of going down, and you see a few winless teams in a couple of these leagues. So
Yeah.
that will be adjusted at some point. But again, new leagues kind of one a new fun experiment here. So it'll adjust itself out. But with that, let's get into our rankings here for the final our final regular season rankings of the year. I'm going to start with our bubble teams. We have Sonoma Valley finishing out the year at 10-0. First undefeated season for a regular season for a public school. I think I saw since like Annalee did it back in, I think, like 2015. Don't quote me on that, but it's been a while since a public school has done it. Finished out the REC Mountain title, beat Healdsburg 35-7 last week. Piner 7-3. They're joining the bubble this week. Great regular season for them. I think they won like 6 in a row, I think, to finish out, or 5 or 6 in a row, I think, to finish out the regular season. So Piners heading into the postseason on a bit of a hot streak. Carrillo staying there here at 7-3 as well. And then a new team has dropped down. American Canyon too is joining the fray here on the bubble. They kind of had a surprising loss, I'd say, last week to Redwood. A Redwood team that was, had some competitive games, but, I don't think many of us expected the 21-6 final in that game. I mean, American Canyon has been putting up points in a hurry all season. And then, 14 points the other week against Casa, and only 6 this week against Redwood. So bit of a surprising loss there for American Canyon, but they're going to drop out of our top 7 this week.
Yeah, joining the bubble squad, American Canyon and Piner. Hey, Piner, since Piner lost to Sonoma Valley, they've been picking it up big time.
Yeah.
Earn the. I know you said we're going to talk about the first round of playoffs here in a bit after we get through the rankings, but Piner earning that 3 seed. Um,
Yeah.
well deserved for sure. More than deserved to be on the bubble this week. But yeah, American Canyon, like you said, just a weird loss, not surprising, like super surprising. And we'll see if they can turn it around come Friday night in the first round of the playoffs. But yep, those are our bubble teams this week.
Yep. Jumping in and with American Canyon's losses, Ukiah, they're finishing our regular season out here at number 7. They kind of squeaked out a 27 win over Annalee. And this was one of those kind of crazy games that some of us maybe didn't think was going to be so crazy, but I think we had 3 games this week that were decided on either failed 2-point conversions or a missed PAT there within like 30 seconds left to play. But that was this was one of those games. Annalee scored with like 30 seconds left. Decided to go for the win, go for 2. The pass just fell incomplete. But Annalee definitely pushed Ukiah to the brink here. But Ukiah still rises up again, just with the American Canyon loss. And the Wildcats secured, I think it was the 1 seed actually in the Division 4 playoffs. They'll be actually playing at Alameda this week, the 8th seed, just because Alameda won their league. So, Ukiah jumping back back into our top 7 here to close out the regular season at 7-3.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, Ukiah kind of a weird, very surprising scoreline. But Annalee's been a little confusing. They've been kind of a weird team after starting 1-6, right? Then they turn around, beat Montgomery, beat Santa Rosa. So I mean, they had the momentum on their side, for sure. But yeah, Ukiah, got the job done. Interesting to see what Ukiah does in the playoffs as the 1 seed in Division 4 for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So Ukiah will be staying though below again, despite being 7-3 and Rancho Cotati being 4-6. Rancho Cotati obviously has a head-to-head win over Ukiah, so Rancho Cotati will actually rise this week to number 6. They were number 7 last week, but Rancho's season is over. 21-year postseason streak is over. Another heartbreaking loss. One of these other last second games decided in the last second here. Rancho needed a win over San Marin this week to make the playoffs. They actually probably would have gotten a relatively high seed in whatever division they fell. We'll talk about the divisions here later, but just a heartbreaking loss. They score with about 13 seconds left, going for the PAT to send the game to overtime, and San Marin actually blocks it. So San Marin comes away with a 17-16 win, and Rancho Cotati goes home for the season. So just a tough go at things this year for Rancho. I think we can look back at the Casa Grande game that they had, I think, to close out non-league play. If they had won that game, they would have, been eligible for the playoffs, with the 500 record against teams in your division. Also, I think that would have been their 5th win on the year, which would have made them playoff eligible as well. So just that game, I think you can probably look back on, if you're a Rancho fan and be like, man, if we'd won that game, things could have been a lot different this year. But yeah, 0-5 in the RSC Adobe, just a tough go of things in league, and just a tough way to end things too this year with a blocked PAT to essentially end your season. So growing year for Rancho, just a tough kind of beat this year, just kind of being up in the Adobe kind of with some young new pieces and stuff. So we'll see where Rancho can kind of go from here. But yeah, first year since 2003 that the Cougars are not in the playoffs.
Yeah, super tough break, and super tough break for Rancho, and it's crazy because coming into the season, Gus, you and I were talking, and we've been talking with a bunch of coaches about, it's crazy to think. It was crazy to think at the beginning of the season that in that Adobe division, someone might actually go winless in league play, and unfortunately, this go round it's Rancho's, but tough streak to end, but I know they got a lot of kids on JV coming up too, so they should rebuild for next year. But yeah, Rancho, still in our top 7 rankings, sticking at 6.
Yep. Coming in at number 5, actually our top 5 stays pat this week after last week, but St. Vincent 9-1 to finish out the regular season, beat Maria Carrillo 48-21 this week. Wrapped up the RAC Bay title, undefeated too in that league. They won, I think, their final 8 games of the year after that loss to Truckee early on. Put up a ton of points, had that marquee win over Ukiah. So St. Vincent cruising as well. They earned the 1 seed in Division 5 for the playoffs, and they're going to be opening as opposed to Arroyo on Saturday. Arroyo, I think, from San Lorenzo. So Saturday, 1 p.m., first playoff game for St. Vincent. Again, coming off that state title, well positioned to make another deep run. 1 seed, there are some tough teams in D5. Salesian's up there. Sonoma Valley's up there too. It should be a lot of fun to see if that matchup comes to fruition. We'll see. But St. Vincent well positioned to make another deep run here in the playoffs.
Absolutely. I mean, St. Vincent has just turned it on since they lost to Truckee, and I think it was the second or third week, and they passed all their tests with flying colors since then. Beating Ukiah up in Mendocino County handily, and then obviously beating a Carrillo team that's had their best season in decades. Pretty handily as well in Santa Rosa. So, St. Vincent firing on all cylinders at the perfect time, and we'll see how they do at in the NCS bracket.
Coming in at number 4 is Vintage, staying put, 6-4 to finish out the regular season. No upset bid last week. We thought, coming off that win over San Marin, the week prior, it's like, hey, frisky team here. They're Cardinal Newman's coming to them, and yeah, it was no contest. Newman came away with a 33-0 win. And Vintage is now the 8th seed. They're going to be hitting the road to play at the 1 seed Liberty from Brentwood in the Division II playoffs. So tough kind of draw for the Crushers there to open things up. And just, I mean, honestly, part of it is just kind of, the luck of the rankings here too. If they'd been a couple spots, lower on the ratings, they could have ended up as a pretty high seed in Division III or something. So, again, we'll talk about all the ranking stuff kind of later and the playoff stuff later. But yeah, Vintage. Again, I think one of the more underrated teams. I think in the Adobe, they challenged. Who was it? They challenged. Windsor was a 1-score loss. They played. We're in Catholic tough. They beat Rancho.
I'm pretty sure.
Beat Rancho too. Yeah. So and one team too that I feel like every coach I talk to, like after they played, it's like, man, Vintage is tough, man. Like they might not have like the crazy resume or the great schedule or like any like kind of huge marquee wins kind of until the San Marin one, but every team that played them was like, man, they're tough and physical. So we'll see. I mean, tough road for them. Tough draw for the NCAA playoffs this week, but who knows? This Vintage team is tough and gritty and like we said, underrated. So we'll see if they can if an upset bid is in their future kind of this week in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. I think we had a couple of questions coming in the season about Vintage in the Adobe League, how they would fare, but just now that the schedule is done and everything like that, Vintage is sneakily like built for the Adobe if you think about it in terms of their physicality and everything like that. So yeah, I would say a pretty strong end to the regular season for Vintage, despite going one and despite winning only 1 game in their last 4. But regardless, yeah, Vintage Vintage proves they belong. That's for damn sure.
I agree, definitely. Coming in at number 3 is Casa Grande, finishing the year out at 8-2, the champions of the RAC Valley League. Kind of a funky egg bowl though. Last week, they came away with a 61-36 win over Petaluma. And so at first glance, you're like, oh, it wasn't that close of a game, but actually, I mean, it was tied at halftime, right, Kienan? I mean, you were there, and then they kind of ran away with it in the third quarter. But I think a lot of us were watching that at halftime, being like, what's going on down there with the egg bowl? But came away with again 25-point victory, sealed up. I believe they're the 6th seed in Division II, and a very fun first round matchup here for the local fans. Facing off, they're actually hosting Windsor, who's the number 3 seed in Division II, hosting them at Casa Grande at 7 p.m. on Saturday. Casa, because they won their league, will be the home team. So fun first round matchup there against Windsor. But yeah, kind of an interesting game though to finish things out. I think it's the most points they've allowed. All season and league. And I think it's the most points they've allowed since that 39-37 loss to San Marin back in September. So Petaluma, I mean, again, was playing good ball there to end the season and put up 36 on him. So, great job for the Trojans there to kind of, make the Gauchos sweat a bit. But yeah, I mean, the Gauchos kind of, battered down the hatches and took care of business in the second half. But yeah, Casa coming in here at number 3 to finish out the regular season for us.
Yeah, they allowed the most points since that San Marin loss in the first half. It was
Yeah.
30 to 30. But that's what the Egg Bowl is. I said in my write up as well. Just records out the window. Doesn't matter that it's the Egg Bowl. But Casa Grande's offense and defense really turned it up in the second half when needed. And just show that they're the cream of the crop of the RAC Valley. We knew that they were going to be one of the top teams in that league coming in, and they certainly proved their worth. So Exciting matchup, like you said. I know we'll go into more detail in a bit on it in a bit, but regardless, Casa Grande ending the regular season strong.
Casa, I think, is one of these teams too that if they're so consistent, year in year out. I think if they have kind of have another great season next year, which is there's no reason to think to think that they won't. I mean, obviously, they lose quarterback Danny Ricotta, who's just kind of all world this year, but with just kind of how consistent that program's been the last couple of years, they could for sure, I feel like, be a team that jumps up into the Adobe when teams realign
Totally,
here after next year. So we'll keep an eye on
totally.
that going forward. But speaking of Windsor coming in here at number 2, finishing up the year at 7-3. Took Marin Catholic to the brink last week, a game that we actually didn't have much in our write up, which I realized on Sunday. I was like, oh wait, we have no details about this Windsor Marin Catholic crazy game, but Windsor took the lead. I think it was 21-17 with about 5 minutes to go, and then Marin Catholic just kind of put together a smash mouth, just run the ball down their throat kind of drive, and scored with, I think, in the closing couple minutes there to come away with
Two minutes left. Yeah.
To come away with a 24-21 win. But I mean, Windsor, again, kind of after those first 2 losses to open, Adobe, that heartbreaker to Newman, the kind of just laid a bit of an egg in the San Marin loss too, but they came back with a couple of really solid wins, taking care of business against against Vintage, without Hayden Anderson, they came back, they beat, against Vintage, they came back and they shut out Rancho in the rain, and then again, they pushed Marin Catholic here to the brink. So very strong game for Windsor here to close things out, and like we said too, they're going to be the 3 seed in the Division 2 playoffs, and I'm really excited for that game against Casa on Saturday night.
Yep, most definitely. Going back to the Marin Catholic game, both Marin Catholic's quarterbacks were hurt, so Marin Catholic had to resort to the Wildcat with their running back for the rest of the game, and a 15-yard touchdown run ended up doing it. But Windsor had they, I mean, we're going to talk about it in a bit, but had they beat Marin Catholic, they could have gone for a top 2 seed possibly in the division, or even moved a division up. So, Windsor. Just playing good ball right now, as they should, and two good high momentum teams playing in the first round. But yeah, Windsor at 2.
Yeah, the Marin Catholic quarterback injury is interesting. It was again, the pronunciations. I think it's Afsharapur was their starting quarterback. I think that's how you pronounce it. Very good quarterback, and I think it was an injury to his non-throwing hand. And I'm not so sure. I had heard the same thing about the backup quarterback too, but I don't have a ton of details on that one. But I think both their status, I think, is very up in the air for their playoff game this week against Cardinal Newman, our number 1 team here in the rankings here at 9-1. Again, like we said, took care of Vintage 33-0 last week. No letdown spot at all for the Cardinals, kind of, just especially after that, tough loss to Marin Catholic, just a week prior. So Newman will get another shot at Marin Catholic, which I know they very much wanted, after that 13-3 loss, that essentially, sealed the RAC Adobe title, for MC. But yeah, I mean, this is setting up to be, Newman's getting their second shot at Marin Catholic. It's MC's quarterback, might not play, probably won't play. We'll see kind of what the status is. I'm sure, Mozzie Moyet over there will kind of keep that all under wraps, up until game time. But, like we saw too, as they, on their final drive to beat Windsor, they can kind of beat teams, any number of ways here too. So just a lot of weapons, a lot of guys you can step up. Just, depth is definitely a huge, a huge reason, for their success. But Newman, this is probably going to be their best shot to get them, I'd say, so NCS, open D1 playoffs, Newman becoming the first Sonoma County team to be called up, to the highest division, for the NCS playoffs. Again, finishing out the season at 9-1, great year for them. Again, the one loss on the year coming to Marin Catholic. So I know that Newman, revenge is going to be on their minds, especially, now in the playoffs, 4 straight losses, for Newman over Marin Catholic. 3 of those losses, ended their seasons, in the NCS playoffs. And now Newman will have a chance to kind of turn the tables here and Marin Catholic's, season here in the first round of the playoffs. So excited for that one. Saturday, 1 p.m., down in Kentfield. So I will be down in that one. And yeah, I just, first round league, first round league rematch, and it'll be I think very exciting to kind of see how that one plays out. But yeah, Newman is going to close out the year at 9-1, and I don't see them falling below number one even for our final rankings. I mean, looking at the wins they have this year, beating Windsor, Casa, Vintage, Rancho, all teams in our top seven. I mean, I think even if they lose to Marin Catholic, I don't see them losing that top spot. I think in our rankings, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, they've been number one for all year long, and by a pretty wide margin, I would say as well. So, it's kind of like Newman, and then kind of like a drop, drop, if you will. But yeah, I think you hit every single nail on the head there. I really don't got anything else to say. I mean, it's just Newman's been playing, the best ball I think of anyone in the area. So, yeah, sticking to number one, guys.
All right, we rankings are all set. We've discussed all those. We are now going to talk about the first round of the NCS playoffs, kind of the seedings, kind of how the new NCS playoff format looked. I think we'll, I don't know, hopefully spend 10-ish minutes on this. Don't want to go too long, but there's definitely a lot to discuss. So just big picture here, we had 14 local teams make the NCS playoffs. Obviously Newman, in the Open D1, we had Windsor and Casa in Division 2. Also Vintage there in Division 2. No teams in Division 3. Division 4, we had 1 seed Ukiah, 2 seed American Canyon. Division 5, like we mentioned, we had 1 seed St. Vincent, number 3 Sonoma Valley. We also have Maria Carrillo there as the 4 seed. Division 6, we have 3 seed Pioneer. We talked about them having a great finish of the year, getting a high seed there. We also have another first round North Bay matchup with Montgomery and Petaluma at the 4-5 seed. No teams in Division 7, but then in 8-person we have Rosen University Prep. The Division 2 8-person champion last year. They're moving up to Division 1 this year. They got the 3 seed. They're playing at number 2 seed Branson, and then LC Allen too, making the playoffs. I think for only the second time in their school history, first time since 2017. Got the number 2 seed in 8-person Division 2, and they're going to be playing against Round Valley. So 14 teams in the playoffs. The big storyline this year has been the new playoff format and kind of how this has kind of impacted teams. So the NCS has kind of taken an approach very similar to how the NorCal State, does their seedings, how the Central Coast section does their seedings, how the Southern section does their seedings, using a system called competitive equity. Essentially, the way that the NCS has done it is they've ranked out. They're saying, all right, there's 56 teams that that are going to make the playoffs. They're basically saying it's the top 1 through 56. In the Cal Preps or Max Preps rankings. Cal Preps is a fantastic resource. It's the same ranking system. Basically, Max Preps contracts out their ranking system. So the rankings that you see on Max Preps are the ones that Cal Preps uses. Cal Preps also has just a ton of other information. Really excellent resource. But basically, if you're taking the top 1 through 56 teams in the NCS, sorting them out, all right, top 8 teams are in Open D1. Next 8 teams are in D2, and so on and so forth. But the one caveat is that teams can only move up or down 2 divisions based on their base division. So, for instance, like if you look at what's a good example here? I'd say Ukiah is a good example here. So Ukiah is they're in base division 2, but because of their ranking, I think they were 23 or 24 or something like that. In the NCS, all of the teams that were ranked above them either went Open or D1. And then they ended up getting the top seed in Division 4. And Division 4, of course, is the furthest that they can fall. So just kind of by almost by luck of the numbers, essentially, they were ranked outside of that top 21 or top 22 or whatever that all those teams made it to Open or D1 or Open or D2. And then, Ukiah ended up falling all the way to D4. But so essentially, though, what this has done is there's a lot of larger schools that have made it, and there's a lot of small schools that did not make it. Brett Spillane, who's a dad assistant over at Petaluma High School, me and him have been kind of bouncing ideas off each other and stuff, and some of our projections and whatever. But he had a great little stat here too that was, I think it was out of the top 56 teams, 40 of them, I think there were 10 in Division 1, like 11 in D2, 10 in D3, 9 in D4. So there's like 40 teams out of the 56 that are either in Division 4 or higher. And so in Division 1 or like in Division 3, you have I think you have 5 teams that are all in Division 1 that drop down to Division 3 just because of their, of their overall ranking and their overall record. So Division 3 is the farthest that they could fall. So that's where where all of them are going to end up. The same thing with Division 4. Division 4 has 7 teams from Division 2. So all of those Division 2 teams that there's no spot for them in D3 or D2 or D1, they all fall to Division 4. And so what this has done is it's created total cascading ripple effect where it's pushing out all of these small teams. So if you look at the NCS or at the brackets, you only have 4 teams that are from Division 7, and that's St. Vincent, Salesian, Ferndale, and St. Bernard's. And St. Bernard's was the last team in there at Division 7. So this has definitely created a lot of angst and a lot of anger, I'd say, amongst some of these small schools in our area, especially over in the North Central one. The NCL one is all the Lake County teams, St. Helena, Fort Bragg, Cloverdale. And again, the first team that, was out of the playoffs and, really they would have made it, had, 1 or 2 things broken their way. But it was Willits. Willits finished the year out at 8-2. They were second place overall in the NCL one. They had a great season and they are not going to be in the playoffs. And then you look at like Division 3 and you have teams that are 3-7 or like 4-6. And so this is definitely a system that has severely impacted the small school teams, and I think we also kind of saw it in volleyball a little bit too.
Definitely.
It had a bit of the inverse effect a little bit, where some of the really quality, middle of or like mid-sized school teams had got bumped up and had to play against some D1 juggernauts. You think of Petaluma, you think of Ukiah, great seasons for them, and then they get pulled up to D1 and one and done in the first round. So it's definitely interesting to kind of see how this plays out. In football, it's definitely a very different kind of situation because we only have 56 playoff spots to award. For volleyball, there's a lot more. There's like almost 100. Same thing with all the other 16 team brackets. So baseball, basketball, we'll kind of see how it will affect these other schools too going forward. But for football, it's a very interesting kind of case study of like, how does this impact schools and how does this impact teams? And, what, like, like, I think critics of this system say that it rewards kind of losing and mediocrity. And I think it's hard to argue against that. And then it just really punishes these small schools. So, now, at the same time, I think, the reason that the NCS went to this system was to try to eliminate a lot of the blowouts in the first round of kind of, routes, the 60-0s, the 56-7, games that you saw a lot of just over, in the last system. And then same thing in the last system too. You saw so many of the same teams just kind of win the same divisions over and over and over again. And the old system really took into account, your enrollment, so how big of a school are you? If you're good for a number of years, you can move up in divisions. But, again, teams like Akalani's and Maroon Catholic and Cardinal Newman, they were just winning the same divisions over and over and over again. So this system was kind of implemented to, in a way, kind of give some other teams some chances to kind of come out of the NCS. I think it will do that, and I think it will also go to eliminating a lot of these blowouts. I mean, some of these first round or some of these playoff brackets should be really awesome and really entertaining. And I think there are a lot of teams that can come out of these divisions where, unlike years past, it seemed like it was already kind of a foregone conclusion who was going to win. But again, the cost of making the of making the playoffs more competitive is clearly that smaller schools are going to be get the raw end of the deal here a little bit. So I know the NCL is looking at creating some kind of response to the NCS and just saying, hey, this isn't fair to us. And I know there are probably quite a other small schools that kind of feel the same way. And looking at teams like and not to like pick pick on any local teams here, but like, Monty and Petaluma, like, both went 4-6 on the year, but, because of their rate, their ratings high enough, they both end up, as playoff spots. And, Monty's a first round playoff game here. So, it's just interesting to kind of see how this is played out this year. It'll be very interesting to kind of see how the playoffs go. If this does kind of go to eliminating these blowouts and these routes and making all these divisions more competitive, I think it will. But again, just hearing from a lot of these small schools, they're like, hey man, what the hell is this? And there's not a lot of room for them to operate here too. So, they're going to have to start scheduling much harder in non-league, but of course, they have to start scheduling up. but then no one's going to want to schedule down because they don't get any, there's nothing in it for larger schools to play a smaller school at this point. So it's just like, I I like what the system has tried to do, and I think it will succeed in doing what it sought out to do. But I think the fact that it came at the cost of kicking out a lot of these small schools, it just does not sit right with me. So I'll be very interesting to see how this gets adjusted, when it will get when it'll get adjusted, what it'll take for it to get adjusted. So first year of this will be very interesting to kind of see how it plays out. But I know right now it's not sitting well with a lot of with a lot of the small schools in the area.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it obviously needs some tweaks. Just like any system, especially in the first year of it. I'll be honest. I'll be honest with you guys. I because we had some sort of experience with volleyball. Volleyball was kind of the guinea pigs of this whole system a little
Yeah.
bit. Granted, like you mentioned, the only 56 spots instead of 100 spots, but volleyball was kind of the guinea pig of this. And you kind of mentioned the Petalumas, the Ukayas that got the short end of the stick, but then you look at the Vintages who had a losing record, but
Yeah.
still got the number one seed in Division 4 and won Division 4.
Yeah.
I definitely, the system definitely needs some tweaks, no doubt about it. I mean, it's still in its first year in existence. I'll be honest with you guys, there are winners and losers with this system regardless. I just didn't think
Any
that there would
system,
be
any system. There's no perfect system
exactly.
too. Yeah.
Exactly. I just didn't think that not like and I want to be careful while wording this. I just didn't know that there was going to be like a certain group that would suffer like there would be this many losers. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Um,
well, and I think just sorry, but I think for the 16 team brackets too, like for again every other sport which has a 16 team bracket, there's almost a weird way where this actually could benefit small schools, just because again there are more spots to give out. I mean, you look at like St. Helena volleyball, for instance, like they finished I think third or fourth in the NCL one. I think they had like a 16 and 13 overall record, like just over 500. But just by kind of again by luck of the rankings and the ratings and stuff, they ended up getting the one seed for their I think Division 5, I think it was, or something like that. So
yeah.
so that is the thing, is that I think once we get through basketball, once we get through baseball, softball, all these other sports, there might be some other small schools being like, hey, wait, this actually might help us a little bit, just because there are more spots to give out, and there's a chance that they could be playing like in better divisions or something like that. But at the end of the day, what this really does, and I think you see this very clearly in football, is benefits a lot of the larger schools, your Division 1, your Division 2s, that are just kind of middle of the road, like for lack of a better term, like mediocre, I guess is kind of the word I could use. But like you look at these teams that are, these big Division 1 teams that are 500 or even under. Well, if they still qualify for the playoffs, they're probably going to drop down in divisions and have to play against the smaller schools and such. Now, on the flip side of that too, you look at like in Division 3, Roseland Prep, plays Liberty, a game that you were at. Roseland Prep has 500 kids, Liberty has 2,000, and Roseland won that game. And,
Or 2,800 actually, even
28,
more.
yeah, exactly, even larger. And then you go back to even further, back to the NorCal playoffs last year, and St. Vincent, School of 200, played against Palo Alto, School of 2,000. St. Vincent won. So at the end of the day, it's like, you may have these massive division school size disparities, but like the games are still competitive. Sometimes the smallest, the smaller schools do win. So that is what the system is trying to address and trying to fix, is these smaller division teams that just run through the playoffs, for whatever reason. But then again, you get you get a school like Cardinal Newman, playing up in division, or playing up in the open division for for football, where you could play De La Salle or Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has 2,000 plus kids. De La Salle has 1,000 plus boys at their school. And Newman has 600 students total for their school. So that's the thing. There's no perfect system, but you are going to see a lot of these teams being like, wait, why the heck are we playing up here? Why are we playing this team? And that will take some adjustment and getting used to. But for the 16 team playoffs, I think it will have a different effect than it will for football with only eight teams.
Yeah, and going back to your St. Vincent point, that's example of this kind of system has the potential to work. We have seen it work, right?
Yes.
It's just in the NCS has never really done something like this before,
Right.
because they've, and again, I don't want to word it wrong, but they've kind of been behind in that sense, because the CCS has done it already. This is how the CIF does it. So obviously there's little tweaks to be made, but we have seen it work in other instances, like you said.
Right. So, but I mean, again, I think this is one data point too. I think we'll kind of point out as well. But if you look at the 30 or the 56 teams that made it in the for football, only 13 of those 56 teams are playing above their base division. And so the base
Hmm.
division too, just to kind of remind people, is the division that you're placed in at the beginning of the year, and it's solely based on enrollment. So if you have like Cardinal Newman, because they have under 600 kids, they're in Division 6. And if they weren't in the Open Division 1, then they would have got pulled up to Division 4. That's the highest that they could have gone. So out of the 56 teams that made the playoffs, only 13 teams actually went up from their base division. 9 teams stayed in their base division, so there was no movement kind of up or down. But 34 teams out of the 56 moved down from their base division. So that's why you see so many Division 1 teams in D3, so many D2 teams in D4, D3 teams in D5, and so on and so forth. So that's the one thing where I think people look at that and be like, wait a second. So this is just all these large school teams are just bumping down and bumping out all these small schools, and it's true. So, the playoffs, we'll see how they kind of break out, and how and if this does make them more competitive, because the last couple of years, if you look at the CCS playoffs and their margin of victory versus the NCS playoffs, the CCS playoffs are far more competitive. They have way more close
Totally.
games, way more close games. NCS has been I think the average margin of victory for the first round has been something like in like the 40s or 50s the last couple of years. So this will, I think, definitely go to addressing some of that. But again, the cost is clearly the small schools are getting, are just having, there's fewer chances, for them to make it in. But um, that's kind of that. I mean, that's most of what I wanted to discuss on that. I think that a lot of the teams that like in our area, I like Ukiah getting the 1 seed in Division 4. American Canyon also, getting the 2 seed in D4. Sonoma Valley. We were kind of worried about them because in our previous understanding of the system, we thought that Sonoma Valley might get pulled up all the way to Division 3. And now instead, they're playing in a bracket in D5 where they're actually, having a much better shot, I'd say, to make a deep run here. And same thing with Piner too. I thought Piner was going to get pulled up much higher, and they have a good shot to win a couple games here. And so it has created some very interesting matchups here. And I again excited for the playoffs, excited to see how they play out. But this is going to be a very interesting year just to kind of see how this format works, and it's not going to go anywhere too. This is kind of in place until it's changed. There's no 2 year, like there's no like 2 year whatever like contract or whatever that this is in place for. This is in place until it is changed, and so this could be how the playoffs look next year and the year after that. Until enough teams kind of I guess rise up, or someone makes enough of a stink that this does some kind of change is proposed. This is the system that we're going to have going forward.
Yeah, totally. And one more little tidbit here. The three out of the four teams you mentioned, you know what they all have in common? They all finished second in league. They didn't even win their league. So it's one of those weird things where it's like, okay, you didn't win your league, but you could be better off,
Yeah,
towards the end. So
yeah, no doubt. So anyway, that was our discussion on the playoffs. Again, 14 teams, are in, from our local area. I think we're going to have every single game covered this week. So we are, the coverage is just ramping up, as we're getting into this.
totally.
So, again, had some NCS champions the last couple of years, had some teams, make it to NCS championship games. I think we have some teams that are very well positioned to make deep runs again this year. And yeah, I'm very excited to kind of see how this plays out and how this kind of impacts the teams that have made it. So, that's all I got, Keenan. Anything else that you want to mention in the playoffs? But that's, I think, our final thoughts here.
Yeah, no. I think we're good. Appreciate you guys for sticking around through all this. I know everyone. I know it was a lot to take in. I know there was a lot of questions, that Gus was answering regarding this whole thing as this thing came to fruition. But hopefully this first week will kind of settle things out a little bit and really get people going, I guess.
Yeah, I was only, I mean, like my, I do feel kind of bad because my previous understanding of this format was completely off. And so I was putting out those those projections like the last 3 or 4 weeks. And they were when I had an AD from the East Bay reach out to me and be like, hey, you're doing this wrong. And I was like, how, can you explain to me? And so he did. And I was like, oh, wait, now I get it. So I feel bad for leading people astray for a couple of weeks, but having it explained to me, it was
You're a
like,
heartbreaker,
oh,
Gus.
I mean, but listen, it kind of clicked there at the end too. But I will say too, it is a confusing system, and based on the info that the NCS put out about it, it was not clear to me, and honestly, it was not clear to a lot of other admin. I mean, I like once I kind of figured it out,
Coaches, admin, everybody.
I mean, it was like once I kind of figured it out, and I started to tell people like what the actual system was, they were like, oh, like there were a lot of people who should have known. I mean, truthfully, that just weren't aware. And just because it was kind of hard to decipher what the, in the language that the NCS had, the interpretation of it that was going to be used. So now I feel like I have a better handle on it going forward too. It'll be interesting to kind of see how it plays out for basketball and bigger sports and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely changed. I'd say how a lot of teams are going to be approaching the season. I think a lot of teams are going to be trying to schedule up and non-league, just try to improve their standing kind of early on, and then kind of see where it lands them as things go on. So anyway, there's so many parts of this. I think
mind games will begin.
I think it's fascinating, and again, also heartbreaking for a number of teams too. So just again, new system, funky system. Excited to kind of like know that I actually have a handle on it now. But yeah, I think this playoffs will be very exciting. So definitely stay tuned for all that, and we'll have just nonstop coverage for you guys this week and going forward. So yeah.
One more quick thing before we get off here. Just a quick reminder. We did our rankings earlier this episode, but those are our final rankings before the end of the playoffs. We will come out with another rankings video at the end of all the playoffs when the playoffs are done. So
yeah, we'll catch you guys in a couple weeks. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and yeah, we'll see you guys on the other side.
See you guys.